Hello YouTube and welcome back to another Dare to Game video. Today we're playing Mount and Blade Bannerlord and we're doing another troop video. Today it's going to be the top 5 best heavy infantry. And so you can see we're starting off with a battle where of course we're using heavy infantry. With all that in mind, this ranking, like all of my troop ranking videos, is going to be based on a number of factors. It's going to take into account the weapons and armor of each unit, how difficult or easy it is to recruit the units, so that could just be a raw mathematics thing, like it would take you logistically forever to get a full army of a certain troop, and that's why they might not show up on the list. But whatever the case may be, I do take into account how easy or difficult it is to recruit them. But like I said, weapons, armor, skills, all that sort of stuff goes into my ranking. So if you haven't already seen it, I've already done several other videos in this same video series, for example, like heavy cavalry and archers. So if you're trying to determine the absolute best troops in this game, these are up-to-date videos and none of this is outdated. So I'm also doing these to replace a lot of my older videos, which are a bit outdated now. But with all that in mind, let's just start it off with number 5. So starting us off at the number 5 spot, we have a BATTANIAN troop, the BATTANIAN WILDLING, and those were the units that I was using in the little clip at the beginning of this video. So for these ones, they are going to be just your standard BATTANIAN volunteers. That's what you're going to start with, and you can find these in any city or village in the BATTANIAN territory, which is basically this little mountainous region right here around this big lake that's inland. But they're pretty dang easy to find, and then once you find them, you just go from the volunteer to the woodrunner, woodrunner to the skirmisher, skirmisher to the veteran skirmisher, and veteran skirmisher to the wildling. These make a really good heavy infantry unit. For one thing, they've got pretty solid armor, real decent defense on them. I don't find them to be at all under-armored in the game. I've heard that as a criticism for them, but I think that's an unfair criticism because I think they're quite nice. For another thing, they've got a decent sized shield, which gives them real good coverage in combat. They're not arrow sponges. Well, I mean, the shield is an arrow sponge. A lot of times with certain infantry units in the game, especially two-handed infantry, but even some one-handed infantry, biggest problem with them is that the shield doesn't give them good enough coverage, so they're just way too weak to archers. But these ones are not. They've got a decently sized shield to them. They usually come equipped with a one-handed axe, and their one-handed skill is 120, so they do decent damage. They're pretty effective against armored opponents and shields, so I really like them in that regard. They also come with a decent amount of javelins and a throwing skill of 130, so they make a pseudo skirmisher force if you want them to, but that also helps them against archers and cavalry, so pretty solid all around. I like the BATTANIAN Wildling. Obviously it takes the number 5 spot on this list just because there are 4 that are significantly better than it, but you know, there are, 20 or 30 other infantry troops in the game that the BATTANIAN Wildling is better than. So, yes, it takes the number 5 spot, but it is still really good. But that's number 5, the Wildling. Let's move on to number 4. All right, at number 4, we have the ASERAI Veteran Infantry. And now these are going to be another one that are just from your standard recruits. So any villages or towns in the ASERAI territory, which is the desert to the south, you can find recruits. And once you do, you upgrade them to tribesmen, and then down to footmen, infantry, and veteran infantry. One of the advantages of these, other than the fact that they're all over the place, don't take a lot of XP to level up, and are pretty great, is that even the standard ASERAI infantry is a pretty good unit. But the ASERAI veteran infantry are our focus here. One of the big perks of these guys is they have really good armor. So very heavily protective armor, which is great. An athletics skill of 130, so they are pretty mobile even though they've got heavy armor. They do come equipped usually with 3 weapons in my experience, so they normally have a one-handed saber, I believe it is, which is pretty dang good, especially against lightly armored opponents, and it's nice and fast. They also come with a polearm, and for that they have a polearm ability of 130, which makes them especially good against cavalry, which is one of the things I really like them for. But they also have throwing weapons and come with a throwing level of 50. So they are a very versatile unit. They're excellent up close with sword and shield, or saber and shield. They also have that polearm, the long spear, which makes them pretty dang effective against cavalry, and they've got throwing weapons, which again makes them effective against archers and cavalry, and really good in a siege on either side. So I love the ASERAI Veteran Infantry. I think a lot of people leave them out of their ranking, and they just don't give them as the attention they deserve, probably because they're an ASERAI troop, and most people think the ASERAI are trash. But solid tier 5 troop. Gonna be way better than most of the infantry in the game. There's really only 3 infantry units that I consider to be better than the ASERAI Veteran Infantry. So that is the number 4 spot. Solid troop, definitely don't overlook them. All right, and so at number 3, our middle spot, we've got one of my all-time favorite units of the game. I just love these guys to death. They're such a good unit. The KHUZAIT DARKHAN. And now these ones are, again, going to be from your basic KHUZAIT Nomad, so any towns and villages in the KHUZAIT area, you're likely to find these recruits. Then you upgrade them to footmen, then down to the right path through spearmen, spear infantry, and DARKHAN. These ones have the similar advantage to the last one. The KHUZAIT Spear Infantry are also quite good, so even if they're not up to DARKHAN yet, these are good infantry units. But the DARKHAN themselves, they've got a lot of advantages. So, for one thing, they usually come equipped with pretty much all the time with a one-handed weapon and their polearm, and so those are your main focuses for the DARKHAN, and the polearm of 130 and one-handed of 130, so very solid troop, and they've got a nice big round shield, which gives them good protection using either of those weapons. So they're very versatile and good against cavalry and infantry. Another advantage is sometimes they do have throwing weapons. Not all the time, but when I bring a full army of DARKHANs into the field, sometimes they've got throwing weapons, and that also makes them a little bit more versatile. But most of the time, in my experience, they don't. On the other hand, they have excellent armor. Some of the best heavy plate armor in the game you'll find on the DARKHAN. They're very well protected, so they can take a lot of damage before they go down. And because of that nice heavy armor, they also don't die as frequently. They'll go down, but, you know, they'll just be wounded, so you'll recover them later. So I really like the DARKHAN. First of all, I love the way they look. I think their armor is super cool, including their sweet Cuban style helmet. I love it a lot. So if you're playing as a KHUZAIT or you just want some really good infantry that, like I said, focuses primarily just on melee combat, but they are really good against cavalry as well as infantry. So the DARKHAN is excellent and takes the number 3 spot. All right, and for the number 2 spot, our runner-up, we've got a lot of people's favorite infantry unit in the game, the Imperial Legionary. And now this one, again, is going to just start from your basic Imperial recruits. You're going to upgrade them to infantry, then trained infantry, then down through the left path through veteran infantrymen and Imperial Legionary. And now, again, you're going to have that same advantage. The veteran infantrymen are also a pretty dang good infantry troop. But for the Legionaries, they're very, very close to being the bee's knees for heavy infantry in this game. I know a lot of people will say that these are the best and that they're their favorites. I come close to that opinion. In my first playthrough, I would have said that, but upon further inspection and in my current playthrough, I've learned otherwise. But they do have a lot of advantages. For one thing, they have a nice high athletics of 130 and excellent armor. Really, really good protection. The face is a slight weak point to arrows because it has that open face, and people say it doesn't make a difference, but I'm quite certain it does, because when I use troops that have the covered face, they are not nearly as susceptible to archers in my experience, but whatever. They have an excellent shield and sword combo, and their one-handed skill is 130, but they also have the dual roll of their pilum, which is, you know, just obviously a ripoff from Roman tactics, so that can be used as a polearm. I've seen them stab with it a lot, but it's very effective as a throwing weapon, and so it's great at taking out enemy shields. So the Imperial Legionary it really, really benefits from a controlled user who turns off fire at will on their troops. So you don't want fire at will on when you're using the Legionary, because you want to get them in formation and wait until the enemy is up close, especially if your enemy is infantry using shields, and then you have them fire their pilums. They'll take out all of the other infantry shields and then they just tear them apart. So in the current version of the game, which is the full release, the Imperial Legionary is phenomenally effective against other infantry units, but they're also effective against cavalry and archers to lesser extents. They don't have a nice long polearm, so they are weaker against cavalry than, say, the DARKHAN or the ASERAI infantry are, but that pilum can obviously also be used against archers or cavalry. They're just super versatile, super useful troops, great armor, great weapons, excellent stats all around. You gotta love the Imperial Legionary, and that's why it takes the number 2 spot. But now let's get on to the number 1 spot. Alright, and so at the number 1 spot, we have the STURGIAN Heavy Axemen, and now these guys are just great. They're excellent troops. Their armor looks a little bit lighter, but it offers really good defense, and on top of that, they have that huge round shield, which makes them really effective in a shield wall in this game. Trust me, I've done playthroughs of this game, like Viking-style playthroughs, where I play a Sturgia, and of course, there's a lot of disadvantages to playing a Sturgia, namely cavalry and archers, but their heavy axemen and their other high-level infantry troops are all really good. They kind of dominate for infantry in the game, at least if you're using using them correctly. But they've got the Sturgian Heavy Axemen. Obviously, they're equipped with an axe and a huge round shield, so they are very effective that way. That round shield really protects them. It's hard to knock it out of their hands, and or break it, and they've got that axe, which makes them super effective against other people's shields and armor. But on top of that, they also have throwing axes, which are some of the best throwing weapons in the game up close. So again, with the Heavy Axemen, you're going to want to turn off that fire at will so you can control it. Otherwise, they're just going to throw them too far away and miss, which is stupid, and I don't like that. But if you use them correctly, you save those axes until an important time when you can use them, and you pop these guys into a shield wall, they're almost unbeatable. The only way to kind of get around that shield is to use the Imperial Legionaries and use their Pilum, but that doesn't work all of the time, because I've seen Sturgian Heavy Axemens take multiple Pilums on their shield and not drop it because it's such a big effective shield. As far as stats on these ones go, nice high athletics of 130, one-handed of 130, throwing of 130, so those throwing hatchets that they use are very effective. Like I said, their armor is a little bit lighter than the Imperial Legionaries and even the KHUZAIT Darkhans. Like it's probably decently close to the Darkhan with a weak spot in the helmet, but very, very heavy, much better than most infantry units in the game. A lot of people sleep on these guys and the Heavy Spearmen, so they kind of follow the same sort of path. They're similar in a lot of ways. The difference between the Heavy Spearmen and the Axemen is that instead of having that extra throwing weapon, you're going to have a spear instead. So the Sturgian Heavy Spearmens are great against cavalry. My recommendation for going with a Sturgian infantry base is going to be a split of like 60% Sturgian Heavy Axemen, 40% Sturgian Heavy Spearmen for your infantry troops. Because that way you've got people to defend against cavalry, and they are great and effective at that, and also people who are better against archers and infantry, and that's what you're going to get out of your Axemen. I'd say it's maybe a two-way tie, but I definitely give the edge to the Heavy Axemen for the #1 spot in infantry. People, like I said, people like to sleep on the Sturgians, and it's probably because they have weaknesses in their other areas, like I said, namely in their archers and especially in their cavalry. They have excellent infantry, and you can't forget about them. All right, and so that is all 5. So like I said, number 5 are BATTANIAN Wildlings, number 4 are ASERAI Veteran Infantry, number 3 the KHUZAIT Darkhan, number 2 the Imperial Legionary, and number 1 the Sturgian Veteran Warrior. So there are a lot of good things to say about each of these infantry units. Basically, in my whole first playthrough of the game, now mind you, that was like 2 years ago, I got about halfway through before I was like, you know what, screw it, I'm going all Imperial Legionaries, and I rocked the entire campaign with just Legionaries. And now mind you, a lot of the heavy infantry units in this game have the advantage of coming equipped with throwing weapons, which also turns them into a pseudo-skirmisher. As you can see, our guys right here are just lobbing their javelins out. But they're well-armored, they've got great high athletics, super heavy armor, solid weapons all around, real good stats. There's a lot of reasons why these troops are going to be a lot of people's favorites and just really do dominate in most situations on the battlefield. You can see I have an army fielded here of just BATTANIAN Wildlings, nothing else, no cavalry for support, no archers, nothing. And all I did was this straight out of Sun Tzu's The Art of War, F1, F3. And we're still winning this battle by a significant margin. But yeah, that's all for today. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you were looking for suggestions or a ranking for different heavy cavalry, hope this was useful to you. But that's all for today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching another Dare to Game video. If you liked this video, please leave a like and a comment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like my content and would like to support this channel, consider becoming a member today for as little as $1.99 a month. It makes a huge difference. But in any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.